production of essential materials needs to be decarbonized fast. However, decarbonization alone is not sufficient. Because in addition to spending our carbon budget, we also deplete the globe of its natural scarce resources. How can we use and reuse our resources smarter, better, and more efficiently, and at the same time make the energy transition go smoothly? These are questions that Tilmann Vahle keeps asking himself. He's co-lead for mobility at SYSTEMIQ, a think and do tank working to change and improve systems in cooperation with business, finance, policymakers, and civil society. He will now inspire us to think not only smart mobility, but circular and sustainable mobility too, interlinking issues of mobility, materials, and energy as a whole. If you want to ask him questions or challenge him during the discussion later, well, you know what to do. Use Slido, and the code is still 2022 ETC. But now, Tilmann Vahle, I hope everything is well and in place where you are. I suspect you are in Munich, in Germany. So I'm more than happy to leave the digital floor to you. Take it away, and you're going to get an applause on your way. There you are.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, and thank you, everybody. I think we still are looking for the slides to be shared fully, and in the meantime, while that happens, I don't have them on my screen quite yet. Here we go. I am grateful for the opportunity to have the opportunity to speak today, and I want to speak about an integrated perspective on decarbonizing the global perspective, global economies, motivated from the need, of course, from an environmental perspective. If we can move forward to the second slide, please. Without further need for explanation, one click further, please. We are nearing the tipping point of ecological ecosystems. If you could move forward once. That means not only from a climate perspective, but from various aspects of environmental boundaries of ecosystems. And CO2 mitigation is clearly the topic of the day, and incredibly urgent. And we also need to safeguard our ecosystems beyond that, including water, biodiversity, and also other health impacts that affect humanity and the ecosystem. Next slide, please. What we at SYSTEMIQ believe strongly is that rather than an extrapolation of business as usual, coupled with more renewables, we really need a systems transformation across society, across all the systems that support human activities and human well-being. And so it's great to see that my previous speakers pointing out to the radical transformations that they are pushing forward themselves, providing the renewable electricity and green steel that will be required to really change the way that we operate fundamentally. Next slide, please. What our colleagues at the Energy Transition Commission at SYSTEMIQ co-initiated have found in their last modeling of the clean electrification exercise is that we will require an expansion of renewable electricity of 3.5 to 5 times by mid-century in order to be able to decarbonize the global economy fully. And as we heard in the previous presentation, renewable electricity comes first in order to have the green hydrogen required for green steel and for the fertilization for all measures following subsequently. And so we see a great challenge, but also a great opportunity for systems transformation from the current fossil system to, which is of course a flow-based system with perpetuate input of fossil fuels, to a stock-based system where we can safeguard materials in the long run. Next slide, please. Now, clearly, the electric mobility is probably the first sector to receive or experience a tipping point where what we see in the automotive sector right now, a fast transition of the value and the expectations also of the capital markets globally to the innovators, and also the behavioral change where customers, whereas in the past were concerned about range anxiety and had images of inferiority around electric vehicles. Now, of course, first and foremost Tesla, but also others have been pushing the boundary and changed the narrative to show how electric vehicles can be really a promising improvement on the current situation with incredible performance and usability. Next slide, please. Now, as we transition to electric mobility, the circular management of the EV batteries is key. Otherwise, wasting those precious resources would cause massive environmental destruction. And also, we find from a more productive use and circular use, we actually decrease costs for the transition itself, making it more viable and accelerate the transition. If you could click once, the transition could be accelerated from the 14-fold expected increase on battery materials until 2030 to 19-fold. If you could click, please. So through the economic improvements, through circular and higher productive management of batteries in vehicles in particular, we actually have a synergy of not only improving the environmental performance, but also improving economics and therefore the uptake systemically. So we see positive feedback loops. Moving forward, please. And once more, please. And then we have a sector coupling, and that's where we get to the system transformation and interactive effects and situation that we can experience with electrification, where through sector coupling, through making vehicles an inherent part of the power grids, through smart charging, through bidirectional charging, they offer the opportunity to add more renewables to the grid and capture the variability to an extent, and therefore capture or mitigate additional CO2 emissions, so that we have a strong synergy through a systems perspective, through an integrated acceleration of one sector to another. Next slide, please. And what that means for steel, or rather steel, we see the parallel but slightly particular narrative where we do require the additional renewables, and through greener steel we'll also decarbonize mobility as one of the sectors, being one of the largest consumers of high-grade steels. But first and foremost, the steel sector requires yet this breakthrough that the automotive sector, as we just saw, is already experiencing, and of course renewables have already experienced. Now steel, in order to actually drive the decarbonization, will require especially the first 10 megatons per year of lowest carbon primary steel in order to unlock that market. And luckily, as we saw in our presentations just before, we've already seen these projects taking off and those volumes being committed and the sales going up. So we are very optimistic that we actually see this transition taking place. And again, we have a behavioral aspect to this, where it's a matter of perception, where green steel has until recently been considered prohibitively expensive, but as our analyses also have shown, the additional marginal cost at best or at worst case were in fact not very significant for the end consumer, and therefore not prohibitive to actually include. And now with the spiking material prices globally, in fact, green sources of steel can be marketable in the near future. Next slide. Now, to actually move this forward, we formulated 6 critical transitions in the 20s that are key in order to shift forward the pathways and the expansion of renewables, and that include the setting of clear targets, the deployment of incentives, including also the phasing out of existing technologies, coal, also petrol cars, to accelerate the phase out and the handover to the new technologies. It's about really investing heavily early into the new infrastructures, into creating integrated visions that take into account the strong science-based transition pathways in order to commit the capital and create the financing, in particular in developing countries, in order to allow them to leapfrog and employ the technologies and business models that will be required. And with that, last slide, please. What we believe is that we need a full life cycle perspective on all measures that we take, that take into account the carbon efficiency and resource efficiency equally across the lifetime of all the measures that we deploy, and looking into a circular management of all the assets that we build out and bring into the market now, optimize their use productively across their lifetime, and make sure that we use them to the greatest extent. And here shown at the example of circular automobility, equally applicable to all other sectors. And with that, we'll create the best cost trajectory, and increasing and maximizing our opportunities to also take with us all consumers and citizens in order to make sure that the behavioral change that comes with it, and the economic effects that come with them will be possible, and will be captured by the population, and so we can move to a renewable future. And with that, it's the end of my talk. Thank you very much.